What is up, everybody? Welcome back. We're about to do this last final review live stream together. Those wings were good. Thank you for asking. So I have compiled a bunch of your questions, and we're going to do this. So we are 12 hours away from the AP exam right now on the East Coast. So welcome back. Thank you guys for being here. We are looking at really trying to answer all those questions that you guys had. So that's the plan. So keep putting the questions in the chat. I think that will work great. I do have a bunch, and so let's see how many I got. I have 36 that I took from the comments, the responses to my original post, and then people put some questions into these comments earlier, into this chat before, so I have some of those. So the plan will be, I'm going to pretty much focus for the most part on the questions as they come. If you want, let me know, put some more in here, and I will try to help you out. So yeah, let's jump right to it. So my chat is moving. It's not actually showing me how many people are. We got like 100. So people are working their way in. We'll get some more. All right. So the first question comes to us from Grayson from BCC High School. So hopefully Grayson's here. This is the first question for real. I didn't really look at any of them, so I just copy pasted. So hopefully, yeah, we'll see. Do you have a career outside of YouTube, or is it a full-time job for you? Well, I better have a career outside of YouTube. So yes, I am a high school teacher at West Broward High School. There might be some of my students in this chat. There might not be. Let's be honest. All right, so there you go. That's that answer. At Fruit Plucker says, how is the date and duration of adjournment decided? Is postponing adjournment considered a check on the ability of the president to perform pocket vetoes? Okay, so that's a deep question. Honestly, you don't need to know anything about that. Like, when we say adjournment, we're not talking about like adjourning for the weekend or for a holiday. Presidents can't pocket veto if they're like taking the Thanksgiving break or something like that. It's only if the session of Congress ends in the last 10 days. And that happens every 2 years. So it's at the end of the year, the session ends. So no, that wouldn't really be a check on anything. Okay. At Fort Gaming 9058, can you clarify how people and companies and people can lobby bureaucracy, and also how federal court decisions affect presidential nominations to the court? Okay. How can people and companies and people lobby the bureaucracy? So the primary way to lobby the bureaucracy is through either hiring lobbyists or being in part of an iron triangle, which would again involve having a lobbyist there and then trying to influence the rules and the regulations that are being made. How federal court decisions affect presidential nominations? I think it might be the other way around. Presidential nominations affect the ideology of the court, which will then impact the decisions that the justices are making, because the court might become more liberal, or in this case, in the last few years, become more conservative. And so we get more conservative federal court rulings. All right, so that's 3 down. Again, if I answer yours and you want to celebrate in the chat, you're welcome to do that too. I have a feeling that those people weren't here yet. That's unfortunate. I've seen Brotato Chip in a bunch of the lives, so hopefully Brotato Chip is here. It's a great name. Could you clarify what the iron triangle is and what each group/committee does for each other? All right, so this is just reviewing what an iron triangle is, which goes well with the last one, actually, so that's good. Beard looking a little bushy there on the sides. So we have congressional committees, interest groups, track agencies. Those are our 3 parts of our triangle. So I remember it as CIA, committee, interest group, agency. And basically, this is that permanent, long-lasting relationship. They make policy in the same areas over and over and over again. And so let's go with the interest group. The interest group wants rules and regulations and laws that benefit their group, their members, or conversely, they want to block rules and laws that would harm their members. The members of Congress, they want campaign funding. They want help winning re-election. That's what they want. And the people in the bureaucratic agencies, they want their agency to be funded. They want to have more responsibilities. So they want to please Congress because they know Congress has oversight, right? So basically the idea is the interest group gives money, campaign contributions to members of Congress. The members of Congress then fund and provide budget to the agencies in exchange for the agency passing rules and regulations that benefit the interest group. So that is our idea there. All right. Don't really know how to pronounce that, but at why us? What does legitimacy mean? Like the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. All right. So we have a whole section about the legitimacy of the court. And we talked about yesterday how the court's legitimacy can be questioned, right? Because they have life tenure. They gave themselves the power of judicial review, and they are undemocratic, not elected. So what does it mean? So for power to be legitimate, it means that it's something that the people, we look at and we're like, okay, we have to respect that power. It is real. It is legitimate. That's a power that has authority over us. So if the court says X is legal and Y isn't, then we all listen because we're like, all right, well, that's a legitimate power. If we view it as illegitimate, then we might start to try to ignore court rulings, to defy them and say, you know what, that court doesn't have power over me because of those reasons. They're not elected, et cetera. They're not democratic. They have this life tenure. They really shouldn't have this power anyway. So that's the idea that we're talking about here. Again, we have one more follow-up from that same person. What document and cases connect to which main concepts on the argument FRQ, like how Brutus connects to federalism, stuff like that. So this was written a few days ago, and I think I covered that really, really thoroughly in the previous live that we just did at 5 p.m. So I'm going to kind of let that one go. Hey, Mr. Dobson, seen that Pearl Jam back there. Yeah, Dark Matter. Great album. Shockingly good. I have been thrilled with this album. I'm going to go see them Labor Day weekend. I can't wait. Going to go up to Chicago and New York. It is going to be awesome. For those of you who are 17 years old, you might not know about Pearl Jam, but that's a shame. Great band from the 90s and still puts on a great show. All right. At Nate Basement 6510 says, I'm confused about fiscal monetary policy. Can you clarify for me? And shout out to Chambly High School. All right. So shout out to Chambly High School. And fiscal monetary policy. Fiscal policy, we are talking about government tax and spending policies. Congress is in charge of it, but they need the president to sign because it's like legislation like any other legislation. So fiscal policy, if it involves the government spending money or if it involves the government taxing you, it's fiscal policy. Monetary policy, on the other hand, is handled by the Federal Reserve, and monetary policy is involving interest rates and the money supply. So we have one fiscal that is political, and then we have monetary policy that is supposed to be independent of politics, handled by experts and the Federal Reserve. So that is our basic idea there as far as fiscal versus monetary goes, and that's about as deep as it goes in AP Gov. All right, at Antimat RO3, this is Teo. Shout out to Teacher of the Year, Mr. Bassetti. All right, congrats, Mr. Bassetti, Teacher of the Year. Respect. How do I get the point for conceding on the argument essay? So again, we talked about that in the last video. So remember, even though it doesn't tell you, you actually have to describe the other argument first. Then you come back and say, however, and you tell me what's either wrong or weak about their answer or why your answer is still the best, and then close the loop. So that's what you do. So 3 parts. Transition. So on the other hand, some may argue and tell me why they would argue that position. Tell me why that position is not the best answer, and then reaffirm that yours is, in fact, the best answer. All right, so that's what we're looking for. We have 211 people here right now, so I want to say thank you to everybody who's here. If you want to, again, you know the routine. I ask you so many times, smash like buttons, subscribe, and all that stuff. As we close in on here, under 12 hours to go to the AP exam. I think I've heard that there's another AP Gov live going on right now. So if you end up stopping over there and you put in the chat and you tell them, hey, there's a answering questions live stream, because you guys already did units 3 through 5. So, don't need that again. But all right. The next one says, so this is Nasra Deer 9388 says, how much should I write for this essay? You're going to hate my answer, but it's enough to get the points. I know that's not what you want. You want me to say 2 sentences, 4 sentences, whatever. Identifies, you can answer in a single sentence. Describe is 1 to 2 sentences. And then Explains are going to be more like a paragraph. So typically we're in the 2 to 4 sentence range. With explains, we want to elaborate, provide evidence. We're going to use the word because, and then I want you to close the loop at the end. Okay. All right. If pocket vetoes only work when, all right. So I think he has a concern about pocket vetoes. I think that's our second or third pocket veto question here from Fruit Plucker. If they only work in Congress adjourns, how have so many pocket vetoes been successful? Could Congress not wait until after adjourning for legislation? So again, it's at the whole session of Congress in, so it's not adjourning for the weekend. And the idea is, yes, Congress could totally avoid pocket vetoes if they just passed the legislation with more than 10 days left in the session. That's all they have to do, and then the president could never pocket veto anything. The problem is Congress is very slow, deliberative, and they wait until the last possible second to pass things, especially big, important things. And so what happens very often is that they don't pass a budget until the last hours of the year. Sometimes it actually goes into the first couple of days of January until they pass some budgets or major legislation, passing like a military budget. And so they give the president that opportunity. But they are pretty rare still, pocket vetoes. Main points of Brutus number 1, letter from Birmingham jail to remember. Again, we just did that in the last video. So we're talking about Brutus, states' rights, individual liberties, letter from Birmingham jail, pro-civil rights, pro-social movements, participatory democracy, civil disobedience, all of that kind of stuff. All right. Sam says, shout out Ms. Johnson from Walt Whitman High School in Bethsaida, Maryland. All right. So shout out Ms. Johnson. What up? Hope you're doing well. All right. Cadence Bond says, please help with the bureaucracy, anything and everything, as well as BICRA and Citizens United. All right. So there is a lot there in that one little question. That feels like a lot, in fact. Okay, so bureaucracy, main things, we got 4 different types of agencies. We got bureaucratic agencies. We have cabinet departments, independent regulatory commissions, we have executive agencies, we have government corporations. And the main thing is how they have power. They get power from administrative discretion, discretionary authority, and they get rulemaking authority. So they're able to make rules and regulations that have the power of law. They get to choose how to implement and how to enforce federal law. So they have a lot of power on setting these specific details of policies. BICRA and Citizens United. Thank you, Tyler. Good stuff in the chat. Just playing. But BICRA, we're talking about banning soft money, so election campaign finance reform. So ban soft money, ban corporate contributions directly to candidates, required candidates the stand by your ad provision. So I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message. And ban the timing. So some timing restrictions on political ads for corporations and unions. And the timing of ads was struck down, that provision, as was the soft money ban, both in Citizens United. And the reason being that spending money is a form of free speech. Contributing money to candidates is not protected by free speech, and that can be restricted, can be limited. But when it comes to the actual just spending of a person's money, the Supreme Court says spending money is a way to express yourself. That's freedom of speech. So you have that First Amendment protection, and it doesn't matter whether you are a person or a corporation. And the other thing, which I didn't really talk about so much back in the Unit 5 review, was super PACs. So because of this, we have regular PACs, which can raise an unlimited amount of money, and they can spend unlimited money independent of the candidate, so on independent political expenditures. Super PACs can do the same thing. The big difference is that corporations can give to super PACs, but corporations cannot give to regular PACs. And then the second thing is a regular PAC can give some money, small amount, $5,000, directly to a candidate, but a super PAC can give no money directly to a candidate, again, because corporations cannot give directly to candidates. All right, so I'm just going to look in the chat real quick. I'll come back to the questions that are already here, but I do want to kind of hit some of these. What's the Watergate scandal? Why is it relevant to AP government? Shout out Basis Goodyear High School. You don't need to know about Watergate. There is a case of like U.S. versus Nixon, but you don't need to know it. Om Patel says, could you please go over gerrymandering? Gerrymandering is drawing districts in bizarre shapes. It's allowed if it's doing so for partisan reasons. So to benefit a party is allowed. To do it racially, not allowed. Steez says, Mr. Carey, that's funny. This is Xavier. from Gabe Itches High School. Thank you. You got me to say it. God bless it. Okay. All right. I'll give you props. LaMoney, Cedars Forest says, LaMoney, I still don't get the difference between civil rights and civil liberties, no matter how much I try. Civil liberties are individual protections, free speech, right to bear arms, freedom of religion. It's freedoms from the government messing with you. So this is the government can't mess with you in these certain areas. You get to practice your religion. You get to say what you want. You get to assemble with your friends. You get to have your guns. They can't search you unreasonably. Civil rights says the government has power to try to eliminate discrimination or protect disadvantaged groups from discrimination. And we typically think of race and race, sex, sexual orientation, disabilities would all be things that we think of with regard to civil rights. Steele Williams from Sarasota High School. How long is each section of the exam? Multiple choice is like 70 or 80 minutes. It's plenty of time. It's more than you need. There's a 10-minute break, and then the FRQ will then be 100 minutes for those 4. Again, probably more time than you need. All right, what's the difference between Politico? Actually, I think that question's coming up, so I'll just kind of let that one go. Bump. Please go over clauses, says Annabelle. All right, I think we will. Natalie also says to go over clauses. Okay. As you just scroll down, I'm way behind on the chat, so I'm going to come back to where we are. So I just skipped a whole bunch of those, but that's okay. All right, so the next one we're at is, I think, Mark. Mark Inkin says, Federalist 78 seems a little hypocritical. It's saying that the power of the people is superior, but justices should be separate from the influences of popular opinion. Can you explain? I think he says probably the hypocrisy. Okay. I mean, he says the Constitution is superior, and the Constitution is there to protect individual rights. So we want the government to not be too strong. So he doesn't, I mean, Madison and Hamilton in no way want like a tyranny of the majority. The whole idea of 78 is that the court should be able to strike down congressional actions that are unconstitutional. And so, that's the basic idea. So I wouldn't really call it hypocritical. He's saying that the Constitution is above Congress. It's above the president. We need to have a limited government. And by having a limited government, then we'll keep the rights of the people protected. And so that's what the court is there for. Ethan says, sup? Not much. All right. AI art evolved. All right. So we got like a little bot coming and asking us some questions. Can you go over some of the formal and informal powers of the branches, please? Basically, when we talk about formal, we're talking about like official powers, things that, typically are in the Constitution or come from a legislature. Informal are ones we think of more like persuasion, bully pulpit, those sorts of things. So usually this is really about the president, not about the other 2 branches. So yeah, thinking of like things that aren't in the Constitution that presidents just kind of do that give them a little bit more power. Okay. Mirthvika says, which FRQ should we close the loop? So it's not a certain FRQ, it's that you close the loop on explain prompts. So regardless of what explain prompt we're on or what FRQ we're on, if you're asked to explain, that's when we close the loop. All right, SR Ronito, shout out Ms. Lyons. I think I shouted her out in the previous video from Richard Montgomery High School in Montgomery, Maryland. All right, so just a shout out. There we go. Oh, we have another one from Mirthvika. Apologize about messing up people's names. I do apologize. I hate to do that. Strategies for answering MCQ questions, especially after you narrow down to 2 choices, the right answer and the distractor. We did the multiple choice practice. It's tough to kind of give strategy without like looking at specific questions. It depends on the type. Make sure that the whole answer is correct. So a lot of times the best distractor is one that has partial truth. So either it is true, but it's just not answering the question, or it's partially true, but partially false. And so that's why it's the wrong answer. So typically it's something like that. So that's what you got to be on the lookout for. All right, let's see. We got Evil Lemons. That's a name. I'm going to be taking the late exam. Do you think I should still focus on the predictions of what's going to be on the exam tomorrow? No, nobody should focus on predictions. Nobody knows. It could be any of the 14 cases. It could be like nobody knows. Predictions is just kind of messing around, having a little bit of fun. Yes, be ready for anything. The exams shouldn't be different. It's just a different version. So yes, the questions will be different, but it's nothing that you would study for differently. Just looking back over at the chat, Marina asks me, can I shout out Mr. Nazarian? He loves Nazarian. He loves my videos. That's good. I hope he still loves me if I mess up his name, but shout out Mr. Nazarian. I climb higher. Can you do enumerated implied reserve powers? Can you talk about the expanded powers, the executive? All right. So that's, we got another Chambly High School. Enumerated are written down in the Constitution, directly stated. Implied are not directly stated. They are based on the necessary and proper clause for Congress. And then reserve powers would be contrasted with delegated. So reserve powers are left to the states. Anything not delegated to the federal, which delegated just means to the federal, doesn't specify Congress or the president, by the way. It's just delegated to the federal, reserved, held by the states. Shout out Mr. Sutherland, Mandeville High School from Thomas. There you go. Jake shouts out Mr. Miller. I think I shout out Mr. Miller already. MMU, shout out Dr. Vera, please. No problem. Shout out Dr. Vera. Okay. So if you could do me a favor, if I shout out the teacher, you don't need to keep putting that on. Can I put on the LeBron jersey? It's right over there in that closet, but I don't foresee that happening. Informal powers of the president. Again, in the study guide, you have those kind of listed. So we're thinking of things like executive agreements, bully pulpit, powers of persuasion. I'm probably missing something, but that's the sort of thing we're thinking of. What amendments do we need to know? Dima Kushnir asks. A lot of them. Like, hopefully you learn those earlier in the year. As I mentioned in previous videos, tonight's not the night for memorizing amendments, I don't think. There's probably better uses of your time, but you should know the whole Bill of Rights. You should know, I'm just going to say numbers, 12, electoral college, 13, slavery, abolish slavery, 14, citizenship, due process, equal protection, 15, black men gain the right to vote, 17, direct election of senators, 19, women get the right to vote, 22, two-term limit, 24, ban poll taxes, and 26, voting age to 18. So I would say that those would be ones to know. Cat Kid Cop, that's a great name and a great avatar, says, if McCulloch versus Maryland was on the SCOTUS FRQ, would it want the elastic or supremacy clause? Probably supremacy, but it depends on what the scenario is. And so you have to read the scenario and you have to decide what they have in common. So there are two possibilities for that. The ones in the past have all been supremacy. So that would be my hunch, but it could be either one. All right. Gaming with Tandeman 2000. Shout out Mr. McGillicuddy again. Yeah, you can still cross out A, B, and C. It really doesn't matter. And in recent years, it seems like they'll kind of give you the points either way. So there's probably not a huge need to do that. But yeah, you can do that. I still advise it. It doesn't hurt. I think it's a good idea. All right. Shout out Ms. Mather. Thank you for sending your students here. I appreciate it. Does Commerce Clause, so this is Sanvi, does Commerce Clause regard foreign affairs too? Yes, it does. So it is both interstate and international. In this class, we focus obviously on the interstate part, but yes, it does. All right, coming back to the questions that I have already that were given to me. Again, thank you to everybody who's here right now. We're at 239. So again, if you want to say thanks for smashing a like button and a sub, that's great. Like I said, hey, if you do want to tell some people to come on over to this, or at least tell them that this exists, and hey, here's a link to a live that's going on right now. You can ask your questions, get them answered. You're more than welcome to. So obviously there's a little bit of competition going up against a giant right now. So could you go over what judicial review and super PACs are? So judicial review is the ability of the Supreme Court to determine the constitutionality of a federal law, of a state law, of an executive action, an executive order, a bureaucratic regulation, any of those sorts of things. And then super PACs, I just did a couple minutes ago, what Jim Crow laws are. So those were legalized discrimination. So those laws that allowed for separate but equal kind of segregation. And could you briefly explain Citizens United? Just did that one. And Marbury versus Madison, which established judicial review. That's the main thing we need to know about it. I don't think you'd really ever be asked about the facts. The other thing, though, that you could be asked about is the constitutional reasoning, and it is the supremacy clause. We often think about supremacy just as being federal above states, which is true, but it's also Constitution above Congress. And so it is the supremacy clause that allows the Supreme Court to have this power of judicial review. Kaylee says, we're watching this in my class right now. Shout out Miss Solden. You guys are watching it in class. That's crazy. Hope you guys got some popcorn, some snacks or something. You guys pulling an all-nighter? You got to let me know what's happening there. Vijaya, sorry. What order do you suggest doing the FRQs? Whatever feels right to you. Again, they're all worth 15 points. There's only 3 parts on FRQ number 1, which means each of them are mathematically worth the most amount of points. But it's usually the toughest. FRQ 2, parts A and B, usually pretty easy right in the graph. FRQ 3, if you know your cases, FRQ 3 is usually pretty favorable. So you might want to like build momentum by starting with some easier ones, but that's a personal preference. I don't think there's really a right or wrong way to do that. Can you explain Keynesian economics? That is coming from Get Into It. Get into it. Keynesian economics. So basically the idea of Keynesian versus supply side, they are talking about what should the government do when we're in a recession. And Keynesians, they prefer that the government should spend money. So we associate Keynesians more with liberal economic policies. So government spending is the way to get the economy going. Supply side is more favored by Republicans or conservatives, and it says cut taxes. So cut taxes, get businesses going first, and then they'll be able to do more hiring and stuff like that. DEMA, fiscal and monetary, I just did a few minutes ago. Zen, I just did Citizens United a few minutes ago. Isaac, important dates. You do not need to know dates. If you happen to know dates, it can't hurt you, but you do not need to know them. Louisa, on SCOTUS comparison, do they tell us what case we're comparing it to? Yes, they definitely do. Had not shaved. That would be wild, though. Mako, any tips on how to remember which Federalist paper is which? Not really. 10 is factions, 51 is checks and balances, 70 is president, 78 is judiciary. If somebody has a good mnemonic or something, let me know. Carmine Cresta says, what to do when an FRQ comes up where you don't know the answer? Any advice to at least get some points for a basic response? Shout out Mr. Watkins. Yeah, that's where you're going to do your best. You guys are masters of BS and finesse, and so that's what you got to do. You just got to try to talk yourself into a point. My advice is to not get super complicated and try to figure out what is the basic AP Gov concept that's here. So don't get too distracted by this scenario. So that would be a suggestion. Is LeBron your sunshine? I mean, you know, I'm a big LeBron fan. Let's go Heat. Maybe he'll come back and help us win a chip next year. That would be nice. Laura says, shout out West Broward. Well, that sounds like a really good school. I imagine they must have a great AP Gov teacher. I don't know. It's just a hunch I have. I almost wore a West Broward shirt for this live, but I didn't like the one that I had. And I wasn't going to wear a polo shirt. Let's be serious. Carter asked, how do you analyze a political cartoon? The main thing is, what's the cartoon? What's the point? And what's the bias? Those are the two things we're looking for. What's the point of the cartoon? What's the bias? Ashita is here finally. I haven't seen her in a little while. So welcome back. That's good. Yes, I answered that one. Sanvi, what's a 527 group? Not going to be on the test. It is a more specific, like we think of them for packs. Everything that's true for packs is true for 527s. It's just a more specific type of group. So we get into like nonprofit versus profit, primary purpose political. Are they primarily a charity? So you don't need to worry about it though. But it's just like, yeah. What Constitution article should we know? That's coming from Tulia. You got to know all of them. There was a question a couple of years ago on one of the tests that just was straight up basically which article was the amendment process. And so you just got to know those. What's the difference, Brian asks, between the 14th Amendment due process versus equal protection clause? Due process is the basis for incorporation. It's about civil liberties. The equal protection clause is about civil rights, protecting groups of people from discrimination. Pork barrel legislation provides money, jobs, benefits to a representative district. It's something that they get passed to try to help themselves to get reelected. All right, so I did that one. So then next up is Bonnie. She says, what documents can I use in support of judicial restraint? Ooh, document for judicial restraint. Also, shout out Ms. Gardis from Paint Branch High School. All right, so what up, Ms. Gardis? Documents for judicial restraint. So that's where we're talking about the court deferring to the democratically elected branches whenever possible, but they could still rule things unconstitutional only if it's really obviously unconstitutional. Maybe Federalist 51, just a checks and balances thing. And so you'd be going with like a weaker version of the courts, a stronger version of Congress. And so you'd have to make that as your, sufficient check and balance. So that one might work. I don't really think you have a whole lot of like document specific stuff though for that one. And these comments are coming crazy fast. So I just scrolled down again. So I was in a section. There was a lot that have come since. So yeah. Okay. Mia says, hit the whip and nay nay. Mia sounds like a very troubled. No, I'm just playing. Sounds like a scholar who has just a great sense of humor. I think that's clearly it, right? Okay, let's see if I'm going to get in trouble for that one. I think I might. I want a 5. They have a nice avatar. Good looking guy. Okay, Worley. What's the difference between inherent and implied powers? All right, good news. Inherent powers no longer on the AP exam. They are like the president's version of implied powers, but they are not actually on the AP exam anymore. Implied powers are Congress. They're not directly stated based on necessary and proper clause. All right, Asher, go over scrutiny, bureaucracy. That's really, really broad. Bureaucracy. All right, legal institutions. So we know that legal institutions connect people to government. There are 4 of them: parties, interest groups, elections, and the news media. I think that's enough for that one. Asher also says go over scrutiny. I assume that he means strict scrutiny. So we're talking about the level of judicial review that the court is using to review a particular law. You don't need to know this for the AP exam. I do talk about it when it comes to affirmative action and Shaw versus Reno, but on the night before the AP exam, I don't think strict scrutiny is really going to be our focus. Okay, Mia says, finish the sentence. DeRappa says, Dr. Appa, DeRappa, can you go over the main things we need to know for Unit 5 on the exam? Yep, I just did that in the Unit 5 review. And going along with Mithrika, what is the best way to narrow down MCQ questions? So yeah, we kind of talked about that. All right. Evil Lemons, y'all don't forget to give a like to this lifesaver. Okay, well, there you go. You heard it from Evil Lemons. You would not want to upset Evil Lemons. So go ahead and make sure you smash that like button. Let's make some lemonade out of these Evil Lemons and do that. All right. Ava says, can you go over what we need to know about the court cases from Lewisburg High School in Mississippi? All right. So we got a little Mississippi representation. Holy Lord, that's chat's moving pretty fast. Considering we only have 245 people on, this is a pretty fast-moving chat. All right, so you need to know the facts, the holding, the issue, and the reasoning. Those are the 4 things for every single case. It doesn't make sense in a video like this for me to go over those things because you could just watch the video 11 minutes. You can put it on 2x speed, and you'll hear all of those for every single case. So I want to go on like clarifying things because that's not really a clarifying question, if you know what I mean. Ava also asks, what's the holding of a court case? All right, please give examples. So the holding is just the result. So for example, Wisconsin can't force the Amish to go to school, to public school after middle school. The Nixon administration can't block publication of the Pentagon Papers. The ban on the timing of political ads is struck down, like those sorts of things. So that's just the result. Then the reasoning is telling us why. So what in the Constitution makes that happen? All right. Cold take from Thomas. Yikes. Brr, freezing cold. Natalie says, could you do an overview of Units 2 and 5, please? Well, I have those great videos, and so check those out. That's a little bit broad for this sort of video. All right, Seeker says, what's the difference with the Fifth Amendment due process and the 14th Amendment due process? The Fifth Amendment, obviously the original Bill of Rights, it was limiting the power of the federal government. And so it says that the government cannot take away any person's life, liberty, or property without due process of law. 14th Amendment says those same exact words, except for a huge difference at the beginning. It says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And so this is now allows for incorporation to take place, which is the application of the Bill of Rights to the states. And yeah, so that's going to be a huge difference. So definitely really important. The 14th is what we primarily focus on in AP Gov. All right, Random Kids 97. If a type 4 asks for if the government, federal government or state government is more effective, are you allowed to tie in the 10th Amendment? I think we're asking about for the argument essay. And so, yeah, of course, 10th Amendment you'd use for states' rights. So if you take the state side, very easy. Brutus number 1 and the 10th Amendment, and you're done. If you do the federal side, you can do definitely enumerated powers, Article 1, Section 8, Congress, or I should say Commerce Clause, Supremacy Clause, which is from Article 6. Those would be a couple of things that you could do. You could talk about how big the federal government is, how it makes unified policy, how it has the power to tax so it can raise more money to be able to do things more effectively. Alexis asks, is Kendrick using cruel and unusual punishment? It could be. It could be. Like I'm not beyond that being possibly true. Marina says, shout out. Oh, okay, I just did that in the chat actually. Mr. Nazarian, he loves your videos. Again, appreciate the support, Mr. Nazarian. And then as a grader, okay, so this might be a good one. As a grader, do you grade strictly based off of a rubric, or do you grade based off of your own knowledge and if it makes sense / answers the question? Kind of in between those two things, which is to say that there is a score sheet and you get trained how to do it. You get trained, this is the bar. So if the bar is up here, students need to clear that bar, go at least that much to get the answer. And if they don't hit that bar, they don't get the point, even if it's good, even if it makes sense. There are sometimes a little bit of judgment calls, but for the most part, you're just trained on it. And yeah, you follow the rubric. So always follow the rubric. So there's not a lot of like, it should not matter what AP reader reads your FRQ. Everybody should be scoring it basically the same way. Does the line of reasoning in the thesis of the argument essay have to relate to the evidence? Like, does the evidence of the essay have to prove that specific line of reasoning? To get the explain point, yes. To get the evidence describe point, no. So I wouldn't stress that too much. But yeah, it's basically if your evidence doesn't prove your line of reasoning, there's 1 point that you can't get. So you'd max out at a 5 out of 6. But I wouldn't worry about that too much. All right. We got big emojis being used. I'm going to not reward that because it did make me see the question, but I'm just going to kind of chill on that. Yo, Ashrifa is in the house. Best teacher ever. I mean, but really, really great student as well. So good seeing you. Hope life is treating you well and you're still traveling the world. Caitlin Martin says, what are the main points to know about the bureaucracy? I think we did touch on those already. I think I might have answered this exact one, in fact, earlier. But we're talking about the fact that we have cabinet departments, we have independent executive agencies, we have executive agencies, and we have government corporations. They have administrative discretion or discretionary authority, choosing how to implement policies from Congress, and they get to make regulations that have the power of law, so that rulemaking regulation authority. Shout out Mr. Ronald Watkins. Not a problem, Bryce. I got you, dog. Dima, what sections do we need to know? Like Article 1, Section 8, that is the only one. That's the only one, for sure. All right, Alice has her hand up. What up? Dirtier Dan gives up. Why is he giving up? What's he giving up for? I hope that doesn't do nothing to me. Shippy, can you explain the contextualization point? Yes, I can. There is no contextualization point. That is not this exam. Okay, Max, difference between civil liberties and civil rights. We did just do that a little while ago. So civil liberties, individual, civil rights, we're talking about protecting groups from discrimination. James Tuna says, can you go over voting behavior, please? Be a little bit more specific. Are we talking about like how people vote, turning out? Like, what are we talking about? Kendrick, is Drake gonna having sue Kendrick for libel and it's gone? Hayden, shout out Coach Bowler. All right, Coach Bowler, what up? Shout out Mrs. Novelli. What cases do we need to know that aren't required? That would just be 3. You need to know Roe versus Wade, Jackson versus Dobbs, Dobbs versus Jackson, and Griswold versus Connecticut. They are part of, and so I said I was going to show this yesterday because I could tell that there was some skepticism when I was saying stuff, which I don't really understand because, you know what I'm saying? Like, why would I make stuff up, right? Like, these cases are listed by name. So I'm going to show it to you real quick. This is on the CED from College Board. That's the course curriculum, I don't know, exam description, whatever it is. But if you look right here, and so I'm going to zoom in and make this bigger, on this paragraph, we're in section 3.9, due process, right of privacy. They are named Griswold versus Connecticut, established a right of privacy. Roe versus Wade establishes a substantive due process right of abortion via the right of privacy. And then Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health overturned Roe versus Wade, said there is not a substantive due process right to abortion, and it allows the state legislatures to regulate abortion. So I'm showing you this so you believe me because, like I said, I saw some doubt yesterday in the chat. It's not, you don't need to know these cases to the extent of our required cases, but they're listed. And so, yes, we got to know those cases. Lexi Fluff says, I might be too late, but can you go over representatives and how they can be a trustee, politico, or delegate? So if I am your representative and I'm acting as a trustee, I'm like, you guys trust me. I'm going to use my opinion. So you guys voted for me because you thought I have good judgment. And so I'm going to do what I think is best, even if you guys disagree. Delegate, I'm like, all right, well, they picked me, so I'm going to do what they want, even if I disagree. So delegates do what their constituents want. Most likely happens for members of the House or people who are facing a tough re-election soon. Politico is that sometimes I act as a delegate, sometimes I act as a trustee. MMU says, my teacher has a crush on you. Probably not. I think that's unlikely, but it's a funny thought. Okay. Ben Hendricks. Okay. So I actually didn't listen to that. I saw Metro Boomin put that out. I did not click on it today. I've been busy with these lives. Not really, just let him lay down the drums and we'll be okay. All right, so let's move on from that particular thing. Sam, shout out to West Broward's AP Gov teacher. Appreciate it. Finally, I've been waiting for somebody to shout out West Broward's AP Gov teacher. It's about time. I'm actually done with the questions that are predetermined. So now I am fully on the chat. And so that is a scary place for me to be. But here we go. I'm just all in on this chat. So I'm going to scroll up just a little bit. That'll help it from moving so fast on me. Piper says, shout out Mr. Ferg, best AP Gov teacher. Dirtier Dan says, can you go over the required Federalist Papers? Again, we did do that earlier in the 5 o'clock video, and I have the document video, so I don't want to go through those two specifically. Again, 10 factions, 51 checks and balances, 70 executive branch, and 78 the judiciary, an independent judiciary. Gaming with Tandem Man mentions Taylor Swift, so you know I got to answer this. Are we supposed to know specific voter restrictions? That one wasn't a voter restriction. It was about the fact that people have to register themselves. So that was, I remember that FRQ. I made a video about it, and I played my little Taylor Swift song. I wrote an AP Gov version of Cardigan. Yeah, man, it's been a couple years. I don't think I remember those words right now, but if I hear Cardigan, it will make me think of my AP Gov version. I can't. Caleb says, for the argument essay, do you have to specify the section of the article you're using? No, you do not. So don't worry about that. Tatiana, how can I prevent my brain from turning off when I see a question with an excerpt above it? Great self-discipline. Maybe from practicing, maybe in the practice test on the ultimate review packet. P. Dottie says, don't come to school tomorrow. That's not good advice. Marcy says, can you talk about Citizens United versus FEC? Sure. We did earlier a little bit. So that's a case where Citizens United was making a movie and they wanted to advertise their movie, and they were not allowed to show their advertisements because the FEC said that those were political ads. They ended up winning the case, and the Supreme Court strikes down bans on independent political spending, but they did not strike down bans on contributions. Emma says, any advice for FRQ1? There's so much vocab to know. It's not really about vocab. It's about, so what FRQ1 is all about, the skill that's being tested is, can you read the scenario that has all this stuff going on, all these distractions, and can you focus on what is the stuff that actually matters? What's the AP Gov stuff that we've taught you? So if it's about NASA, if it's about the Federal Reserve, the FEC, FCC, it might get into stuff you've never heard of and have no idea about, and they're trying to scare you. What you need to do is just be like, all right, they're a bureaucratic agency. I know what bureaucratic agencies do. They have discretionary authority. They have rulemaking authority. They implement policies, and you answer it like that. So that is my biggest advice when it comes to FRQ number 1. And always, 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 always reference the scenario in every part of your answer on FRQ number 1. JT Cooper says, what materials should I bring to the AP exam tomorrow? Pens, pencils. They do not provide those for you on AP exams. Bring your own stuff. If your classroom might be cold, bring a sweatshirt, bring a hoodie, bring a watch, bring a snack. You're going to be in there for about 4 hours from the time you start until you're out after the FRQs. So you might fade fast. You don't want to get hangry while you're doing that. So I would suggest those things. All right. I think I have, so Tolia asked about which of my videos. I think in the description I have links to videos like the ones like the unit reviews, the case reviews, the document reviews. But again, you just look at my channel. I have playlists for all this stuff. Robert, knock it off. Stop asking that. All right. AJ says, what is the thing most students get wrong in the AP Gov exam? That's a good question. It's definitely the FRQs. The FRQs score way lower than the multiple choice does. So there's not one like specific thing. People do the worst on the branches of government section of multiple choice. And then for FRQs, it's going to be the explain point on the argument essay. It's going to be the alternate perspective on the essay. It's going to be that second point in part B on the third FRQ, the core comparison. And it's going to be a lot of FRQ1. FRQ1 is the lowest scoring thing. So, yeah. All right. Let's see. Shout out Mr. Brown. Okay. Can you explain the hierarchical system of the bureaucracy? So not really. You don't honestly. So the idea I think that you're talking about is how cabinet departments, so your independent regulatory agencies, commissions, and your executive agencies fall underneath the umbrella of the cabinet departments. So the cabinet department has a very broad area of expertise. So like you have the Justice Department, and then underneath them you have things like the DEA. So you have where there's agencies on top of agencies, and it's the cabinet that's at the top. Ishida says, LaMoney, could you please go over the difference between judicial activism and restraint? Activism, we're talking about the belief that courts can and should, judges can and should use their power, and they should overturn stuff when it's wrong. If they think it's wrong, overturn it. If they think it's unconstitutional, overturn it. If they think that they could make social progress, do it. Judicial restraint is, let's not do very much. Let's usually let the democratically elected branches make policy, unless they're clearly wrong, in which case we can strike stuff down. But for the most part, we're going to let the democratically elected branches do stuff. Ethan, difference between party line voting and straight ticket voting. Straight ticket voting is done by voters on election day. It's where they vote for all Democrats or all Republicans for every race on the ballot. Party line voting is done by members of Congress, and that is when all the Democrats vote one way on the bill and all the Republicans vote the other way on the same bill. Shout out Miss Sandoval. Shout out Mr. Peterson. Can you explain the different news media? I'm not exactly sure what that means. I don't know exactly what that question's asking. 527s aren't going to be on the AP exam. Again, if you happen to see that term, it would be in a passage and you wouldn't need to know it, but just be like in your mind, be like, oh, it's just like a pack. And that is simple enough. Okay. Do we need to know specific executive agencies? You don't need to know them. They won't ask you questions about what the agency does. Most likely there are certain agencies that you will see mentioned because they like to give you scenario questions. But again, all you need to know is the AP Gov concepts. You don't need to know specifically what NASA does or EPA or something like that. They do usually pick the famous ones. Bump. All right, let me scroll just a little bit. This chat is out of control fast. We got 1,800 messages right now in this thing. Anna, hi, LaMoney. Can you briefly go over the line of reasoning for our thesis? How broad should it be? All right, hope you're doing well tonight, Anna. Good to see a West Broward student here. Your line of reasoning really just needs to show the direction that you're going to go. So it needs to show that like it matches your claim. So if you said something about participatory democracy, then your line of reasoning should show that you're talking about people being involved. If you said pluralist, it should show something about groups. So it doesn't need to be overly specific, but it can't be so broad that it's meaningless. So it's kind of tricky, but it's like, show the reader that you know what your claim actually meant. What is Schenck versus U.S.? That is a required Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court disrespected free speech. Michael says substantive due process versus procedural, please. Okay, that's a good one. We spent some time on this yesterday when we talked about Unit 3. And there, again, was some disagreement in the chat. So I'm going to show you right from College Board. So it's just right up above here. We're going to be in section 3.8. And procedural due process, what I told you, is that it's all about the process. So here you go. This is your definition from College Board. Procedural due process requires that governmental officials use methods that are not arbitrary when making and carrying out decisions affecting constitutionally protected rights. So these are reinforced and go by things like the Miranda Rule, the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. But these procedural protections are not absolute. There is a public safety exception. So procedural due process, we were talking about the process of your rights not being violated. Okay, so you have the right to not be searched unreasonably. You have the right to a fair trial. You have, protections against eminent domain and due process rights. You have trial rights, all these things. So that's procedural. One more, so you still have more procedural. There you go, unreasonable searches and seizures, right to counsel. I just said these things. Protection against warrantless searches, limits on bulk collection of metadata. Also protects the rights of the accused during a trial. So this is literally everything that I just said. So that's all procedural due process. Substantive due process is going to be here in the right of privacy section. And so I'm going to find that. It's going to be somewhere right here. Here we go. Substantive due process. Oh, here. So they actually define that up here. Individuals have, so here it is. Well, that's the unenumerated rights one. Okay, so have rights beyond those. Whether government, here, substantive due process to examine whether government laws and actions are arbitrary infringements of individual rights. So as opposed to being process-driven, substantive due process is that we have rights that can't be arbitrarily infringed upon. And so the primary one for us is going to be the right of privacy. So essentially what this is telling us is there's two ways to figure out that we have a right of privacy. One is to go by the Ninth Amendment, which says that we have unenumerated rights. And the other way is to go through substantive due process, which again says that there are certain government laws and actions that are arbitrarily infringing on people's rights. All right, so that is a great question. I'm glad somebody asked it. I hope that helps. All right, Rigsme says, hey, LaMoney, what's your prediction for the SCOTUS case this year? I'm going with, what were my three? I said Tinker, Shaw, and Baker. Those are the three I'm going with. I know I'm cheating a little bit. Natalie, should I go to Chick-fil-A later? Oh, after. Okay, I'm glad you said after because it ain't open tonight. But yeah, that'll be a good way to celebrate walking out of that exam knowing you probably just got a 5. I think you should definitely go celebrate with some Chick-fil-A. Robert says he will ask appropriate questions from now on. Hope so. Sorry about that. A little cough. I've been talking a lot this weekend. I don't know if you've noticed that or not. Is there a difference between institutional and structural barriers for voting? No, that would be the same thing. Issue networks. Adia asks, please explain issue networks. It's the same as iron triangles for all intents and purposes. In reality, they are a looser relationship that kind of comes and goes depending on the policy. And instead of only including those three things, committees, interest groups, and agencies, they also include like academics, so like professors, people from think tanks and other groups. So they're broader and more fluid. But for AP exam purposes, they seem to treat those pretty interchangeably. I would definitely love to shout out Mr. Jelk from Plantation High School. Is that Plantation High School in Broward County? Because for sure, that's awesome. Mr. Parkinson from Sarasota High School. I think that's like shout out number 4 for Mr. Parkinson. Anna, what unit is most and least on the test? Unit 4 is the smallest. Unit 2 is the biggest. Fort Gaming. Does the line of reasoning and the thesis need to match both the evidence or just one? It's not that it matches the evidence. Again, it's that you have created a line of reasoning and then you make your evidence match your line of reasoning later, because the line of reasoning comes first. Gaming says, what would you do if you got Marbury versus Mass on the SCOTUS FRQ? I'd be happy, because I know it's the supremacy clause that gave them the power of judicial review. And I don't think they'd ask you about the facts. So I think you would say that they used judicial review to say that the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional. Hannah says, please explain lobbying. Lobbying is when interest groups hire a lobbyist, a person, to go to congressmen and try to convince them to vote the way that they want them to vote, to do their bidding. And so they are going to provide expert information. They know everything about that topic. They have some kind of like, ideological similarities, and they work together with their friends in Congress. Sociological voting, I don't think is a thing. I know it's a wrong answer choice on a test, but I don't remember ever having seen that before. All right, Steele, I got your shout out, so you're good. Thank you for your enthusiasm, though. Natalie says good night. All right, she got her Chick-fil-A answer, and she is out of here. All right. Luke says, LaMoney, what is litigating? And what do you think the SCOTUS cases will be? So I just answered that one. So hopefully you heard. Litigating is filing lawsuits. And so challenging something in the courts. That's what we're talking about with litigation. So filing a lawsuit and trying to get a policy overturned. Tatiana seems desperate. Please, Lamana, how do we know what is wrong with the graph? Oh, that comment just disappeared. I didn't get to it fast enough. All right, so I'm going to scroll down again. Oh, my God, these comments are crazy. We're at 2,100 now. Alana over here. Okay. I don't know how that works, to be honest with you. Okay. But I appreciate it. It's appreciated. So first, Mr. Beat. How exciting was that, by the way? That was pretty cool. Okay. Ben keeps telling us about this sweatshirt story. I don't know about that. Alana, what are the only 2 committees in the House and not the Senate? There's lots of committees that are only in one or the other. I think what you're thinking about is the House Rules Committee, which is a committee that has the extra legislative step that's only in the House and not in the Senate. So House Rules Committee. And then you're probably thinking of the House Ways and Means Committee. That's where all tax and revenue bills have to originate, because they have to originate in the House. Shakti says, do we need to know the specific people, Hobbes and Locke? No, you do not. Constellations says, Mr. Lawan, if I got 45 out of 55 on the MCQ but not good on the FRQ, will I be okay? So you have to get some points. So what I always say is, to feel relatively confident, you want to be at least in the 40s on multiple choice. And that leaves you needing about 30 points on the FRQ, 30 out of 60. So if you can get half the FRQ points, you'll be okay. So with getting 45, you'd only need about 25 on the FRQ. So yes, you should be okay, but you can't like completely ruin the FRQ because it's such a huge part of your score. Vibing Bunny, that's a name, says, for the free response, do we need to use 3 sources? No, just 2. Also, can we choose another case from the given 3 cases to choose from as our own? Well, it's not cases, it's documents. So you can use other documents, though, for sure. Caroline says, do we need to know who the president can appoint without Senate confirmation? Yeah, kind of. So mainly if you know who the president needs Senate confirmation for, then everybody else doesn't. So cabinet, executive agency heads, ambassadors, and judges all require Senate confirmation. So then people on the White House staff do not. That's the main thing there. Lily says, shout out to anyone taking this mess tomorrow. Please go over the powers. I went over some powers, so I hope, Lily, you got to let me know in the chat if I answered what you wanted. But I think Powers are talking about implied. Congress has implied powers that are based on necessary and proper. They're not directly stated. We have enumerated, means that powers are directly written down. We have delegated powers given to the federal government. We have reserved powers that are held by the states. Anything not delegated is left to the states. We have concurrent powers that both sides have, so both the states and the federal, and those are the powers. So I've seen that question a few times. Hope that helps. Rona says, can you walk us through the structure for the essay FRQ? I have videos for that, and the last live chat at 5 p.m. did that. That's a little tough to do in such a question asking video, but I appreciate it. So be sure to check those out if you want to know a little bit more. Argument essay. So I do tell you that I think that there's 5 specific argument essay topics. I don't know if I'll remember all 5 of them right now off the top of my head, but there's one of them is always a federalism one. There's always like a democracy one, like a pro-democracy or anti-democracy one, like how much power should people have. There's usually a liberty versus security one. There is often, I'm trying to think, a branch versus branch essay. So that's 4. So I predict it'll be one of those. Shout out Mr. Neighbors. Earmarks are probably not on the AP exam because those have gone through, they've been allowed, they've been disallowed. But earmarks is pretty similar. We're talking about money being set aside for a specific project. So the difference between earmarks and pork barrel is that pork barrel is the legislation, the law saying that we're going to provide money, jobs, or a project, or benefit to a district, whereas earmarks is setting aside the actual money. But they go together. But I don't think that earmarks, they're not on the course description anymore. So I don't think they're going to be there. Parker wants me to shout out Mrs. Lundberg for being a good teacher. Not a problem. Shout out Mrs. Lundberg. You're a great teacher. I'm going to go great. Parker said good, but I'm going great. And Jack, good job locking in studying tonight. I already answered that from Vibing Bunny and from Lily. All right, so I'm going to scroll down. I know a lot of you obviously put your questions in the chat multiple times, so it makes it a little tough there. Houdini shouts out Mr. Philo. So what's up, Mr. Philo? Hope you're doing well tonight. Piper, what's the best way for the people to check the government? Elections, marching, protesting, demonstrating, contacting members of Congress, those sorts of things. Addison, can we use a Supreme Court case as evidence on FRQ4? Yes, you can. And Addison also wants to know what we're going to do in class the rest of the year after tomorrow. We are going to sit back and enjoy the fruits of our labor. I think you'll agree with me. We have worked hard enough this year, so we are going to relax a little bit. So we'll see what that means exactly, but we are going to be a little bit more slowly paced. All right, AJ says, so an example of arbitrary due process would be illegal. Oh my God, and that question disappeared. I got to scroll down again. The chat is moving too fast. Oh my God, we're at 2,500. Whew, it's wild. AP Practice says, can you answer Lori's question? I also have that question. The problem is I don't see it because this chat's moving fast. So I'm sure it'll be asked again. Om Patel asked a few times, can you explain the difference between 6th and 7th Amendment? 6th Amendment is for criminal cases or criminal trials, and the 7th is for civil. Civil is money, so it's a lawsuit. 6th, criminal, you could go to jail. Harry says, can you please shout out everyone at Richard Montgomery High School, specifically Mr. Vicari, so I can go to sleep? Shout out Richard Montgomery High School, and specifically Mr. Vicari. Harry wants to go to sleep, so good night, Harry. It's a little early. If you're in, what state are we in? That's probably, I don't know, Montgomery, so maybe we're in Virginia. It's 9 o'clock, but all right. Get your rest. That's good. 11 hours. We were just under 11 hours to go until the AP exam. All right, here's a Lori question. So this might be the one that the other person wanted. Do we need to know all the fractions? You do need to know both of those. 3/5, 60 members for a filibuster. Yes, you do need to know that. And yes, 2/3 to override a veto. Yes, I apologize, but yes, you do. And it sounds like you know them, so that's good. Any important vocab to remember? I mean, yes, there's a lot of important vocab to go over. Is Shani with the 100% West Broward AP Gov pass rate 2024. She's lighting candles for that. I appreciate those positive vibes. Let's hope for that. All right, log rolling. Look at Hayden with a real question. Log rolling is vote trading. So you vote for mine and I will vote for yours. Liberty versus order. We're talking about things that are gonna, like that trade-off. between, so we're thinking about like Fourth Amendment, we're thinking about rights of the accused. So things like the exclusionary rule, things like the Patriot Act and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Okay. All right. Bump, bump, bump. Uh-oh. Well, now I'm on a help article. All right. So, let's see. So thank you to Brady. To be honest with you, I don't even know how that works. So I appreciate the idea. I don't know if I'm actually doing anything with that. But Jake, can you shout out Mrs. Goggins and Mrs. Goyette? They are great teachers, and I believe you. I think that they are. All right. Constellations, I answered that one already, so I'm going to scroll down. Okay. 14th Amendment due process, I did that one already. Uh-oh, looks like I'm frozen on there. That's not good. And that's not a particularly good way. That hat looks fake. Everything about that looks fake, and it's not good. I need a little bit of color. I could get back out into the sun a little bit, I think. Baker versus Carr. Good stuff there. U.S. versus Lopez. All right, so Baker versus Carr is our redistricting case, and the Supreme Court says that redistricting and reapportionment issues are justiciable. They can be decided by federal courts. Huge deal. U.S. versus Lopez says Congress has exceeded their Commerce Clause powers when they passed the Gun-Free School Zones Act because that does not substantially affect interstate commerce. All right. Maddie, do we need to list specific evidence in the rebuttal? No, you do not. Abdel, I don't understand why they made it so they have to incorporate rights into the states. Can you explain it? Because of the 14th Amendment, because of the Due Process Clause, because it says that nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process. And so, they're not allowed to do that. And so they say, you know what? That liberty is more broad. It includes all fundamental liberties. So things like free speech and then freedom of religion and freedom of assembly and the right to bear arms eventually and all those things. Jonathan says, why don't they use the clear and present danger test? They overturned that in 1925, so it did not take long. In a case called Gitlow versus New York, they got rid of it. Shout out Mr. Blythe. What's up? Appreciate you and their support. Let me just scroll down in the chat. Since I'm looking at myself and I'm frozen, I wonder if I'm frozen to you guys, but nobody has said that in the chat right now. All right, so I'm going to say that we're going to wrap this up in the next 7 minutes and 2 seconds. So by 9:15, we are going to finish. So just telling you that. Again, thank you to everybody who's here right now, all 239. I appreciate you. I know that there's probably thousands of people in a different AP Gov review right now, but that's okay. I appreciate you guys so much. Yippity hippity. If I want to get a 3, what do I need to get right on both parts of the test? You need to get about 60% of the test right, and you'll get a 3. What's good for breakfast tomorrow? Something that will help you to not be hungry and for your belly not to hurt as you're taking the test. Shout out to Aditya. Okay. Iron Triangle. I did that a little while ago. Isaac says, aren't concurrent powers hypocritical to supremacy clause? No, because supremacy is just when there's a conflict. If the federal government taxes your income and so does the state, there's no conflict because they're both just taking money from you. So they both get their money. So neither one of them, there's no conflict. Nick says, can you shout out Mr. Felch from Plantation? All right, there you go. Eric wants me to repeat my predictions for SCOTUS. I'm going Tinker. What was I saying? It was Tinker, Shaw, and Baker, I think. Tinker, Shaw, and Baker. And K, I'm not frozen. That's good. I'm frozen on the one that I'm seeing, but yeah. I'm not frozen on my main screen, but I have a little iPad set up looking at it. Exclusionary rule. Okay, so Race Car says, can you go into more depth about exclusionary rule? What happens when an illegal search happens and the police find incriminating evidence? Man, we're up to 3,100 comments in this chat. That's ridiculous. Illegally obtained evidence cannot be used in trial, but the person can still be tried with other evidence. So they just reject that evidence and they don't let the jury see it because it would bias the jury. Grunchy says, in your FRQ practice about selecting new justice, the interest group question responses are to supply funding and run media ads. Would protesting be something the interest group could do? Yeah, but that's not as effective. Honestly, like get money to get people in the Senate who will be on your side. And yeah, I would stick with those. I think that those are better. Advertising is better because really to get people to come out and march and protest over a Supreme Court nomination, maybe some people will, but I don't think you're getting like tens of thousands of people for that very often. A complex person does not need to know the Lemon test, but it is the test that's used to determine whether something violates the Establishment Clause. Horse race journalism, we are talking about the tendency of the news media to focus on polls to the exclusion of like detailed, actual good reporting. Shout out Glenn Sutherland. Okay, there you go. I've seen that a lot. That's in there about 1,000 times. Adia says, please, what is quasi-legislative? It's where regulatory agencies, bureaucratic agencies, are acting like the legislative branch when they make rules. So that's something that a critic of the bureaucracy would point out. So if you like the bureaucracy, you wouldn't use that term. If you don't like them, you'd be like, oh, look at them with their quasi-legislative, their quasi-judicial powers. They're acting like all the branches because they're making rules, they're enforcing rules, and they're punishing violators. So that's part of that criticism. All right. So actually, I feel like I've answered a lot of these questions. As I'm scrolling, I'm seeing, repeats of ones that I have definitely talked about. So I'm really glad for that. I think that I did answer the vast majority of questions so far. So at this point, I kind of want to say again, thank you guys so much for all your support this year. There is the question now. See, Sophia knows how it's done. How do you get such a magnificent beard? Now, see, she, just trying to, but it worked. It worked. What a great question. Appreciate it. I don't even care. She's joking. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm here for that. So now you know the secret. Should you stay up studying or get extra sleep? Study for a little while. Like, how much sleep do you need? 5-6 hours, you might be good. But I would suggest you don't want to be exhausted. So get some sleep. So maybe 11 o'clock or so, and then get some sleep. Make sure you get to school on time. But don't stay up all night. There will be people. My channel is going to be going until probably about 2 or 3 in the morning. It'll slow down around 2, and then it starts popping off again at 6. It's pretty funny to watch the bars on that. All right. Germaneness requirement in the House, Dirty or Dan, just means that all discussion in the House must be on topic. If I want to get a 5, what do I need to do? You need to get about 82% of your points. So you need to get probably about 90% of your FRQ, and then get like 75 to 80% of the 90% of the multiple choice, and then get about 75 to 80% of the FRQ, and you should be good. Mia wants a class party. Well, then you got to plan it. That's not me. You are welcome. I hope that I have saved you in some way, but really it's all you. You guys are the ones doing the work. So it's all you. So you guys stand proud, take credit for your success, because you're going to do great tomorrow. So at this point, thank you guys for all the questions in the chat. Thank you for all your support all year long. If you've been watching, if you just found me today or yesterday, I'm glad that I've been able to help you in some way. So thanks again for all the likes, the subscribes, telling friends, and all of that stuff. I really do appreciate you. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you one last time. On Wednesday evening, they're going to release the FRQ prompt. So on Thursday, I will do one more video. I'm not sure yet if it's going to be a video or a live, but I will reveal the answers. I will make my own answer key to the FRQs that are released on Tuesday. And so feel free to come back here and see how you did on the FRQs, and I'll basically score them for you. All right. So I think that's it. It is 9:14, so we're getting out of here right on time. Wanted to be done by 9:15. So thank you guys again. I wish you all the best. Relax, get some sleep, have some breakfast, bring a snack with you in the morning. You got this. So one last time, or, go ahead and you should watch my speed run, obviously, on the morning as you're going to school. Put that thing on double time speed. It's going to be crazy fast, but you're just going to hear all that words, those vocab. So, this won't be the last time. But until next time, this has been a LaMoney production.